Today, I'm going to teach you absolutely everything you need to know to become a god at playing Vecna. He's a complex killer with many abilities, but I will make sure you know every single one of them by the end of this video. This is the original Vecna from Dungeons & Dragons, not the Vecna that most people know from Stranger Things. However, that Vecna is based off of this Vecna, so they have some similarities. In Dead by Daylight, Vecna has a magical sigil below the back of his neck that limits his powers to prevent him from leaving the entity's realm. Without the sigil, Vecna could potentially be more powerful than the entity itself. And that's a little bit scary, but we're safe for now, so strap yourself in while we unfold the backstory of Vecna. When Vecna was young, he was obsessed over the study of wizardry and magic. He seemed to master forms of magic that typically took decades for others to master. He clearly had a special talent, and as he grew more powerful, he became more ambitious. He eventually started studying necromancy, the magic of life and death, and was able to keep himself alive for centuries, turning from an old wizard into a lich. He grew strong and powerful, gaining high status and obtaining servants. But one day, the servants found something, a torn piece of paper written in a language he had never seen. He sensed a dark energy from this paper, and his curiosity was piqued. For months on end, he studied this paper, trying to figure out its meaning. As he studied, he heard reports of people disappearing without a trace during the night. He felt as though these disappearances and this mysterious paper were connected, so he went to investigate. At the scenes, he sensed the same dark energy that he sensed with the paper, but there was nothing else for him to investigate. There's no patterns to these disappearances, no common motive, no signs of struggle, not even a body. And that's when it suddenly clicked. A word on the page that Vecna had been interpreting as dying would make more sense if it was instead disappearing. After substituting this new word into his translations, he finally understood that this paper was a spell. He began to speak the words of the spell, and the room darkened, filling itself with a creeping black fog. He felt himself being pulled by the fog, but due to his excessive power, he could easily resist it. He looked into the darkness. There was something alluring about it. It was powerful, formidable. It was an evil that even he couldn't comprehend. Curiosity overcame him. He knew that whatever this fog was, wherever it came from, was the only way for him to harness its power. He stopped resisting and let the fog consume him. Oh boy, here we go. Vecna has 4 different abilities, each with their own unique and complex traits and mechanics. This is the first killer in the game to have a radial menu, and it was implemented almost perfectly, so good job, behavior. The first ability is called Fly, which is the one on the top of your menu. Basically what this does is it lets you fly. Alright, moving on to Mage Hand, which is the ability on the left. This is definitely his strongest ability, as it completely lets you block pallets from being used properly. If a pallet has not been thrown, you can use Mage Hand to prevent it from being thrown for the next 4 seconds. 4 seconds isn't a lot, but it can give you free hits on unsafe pallets if you have a brain, so this is a pretty bad ability. If a pallet has been thrown, the Mage Hand will lift it back up almost instantly. Obviously, this gives survivors another pallet to utilize on the map, but if you're right behind them when you do this, it will allow you to get a free hit or down, so it can be extremely useful and be worth the trade-off. His third ability is called Dispelling Sphere, which is the ability on the bottom. This is a giant floating ball that is invisible to the survivors and moves very slowly in one direction. Any survivors that are inside of the sphere are revealed by Killer Instinct. It's honestly not that great of an ability. I'd pretty much just recommend casting your sphere whenever it goes off cooldown. His fourth and final ability is called Flight of the Damned, not to be confused with his flight ability. Damn, they made this confusing. This is the ability on the right of the menu, and the easiest way to explain it is by calling it a shotgun. You basically shoot 5 entities in a shotgun formation, and they will fly straight forward for a few seconds, damaging any survivor it comes in contact with. However, it's not that simple, of course, because you need more things to memorize about this killer. Survivors have quite a bit of counterplay to this ability, which is nice. There's a lot of killers that could learn from this. For one, if they're crouching, these projectiles cannot physically hit them. And 2, if they're a decent distance from you, the spread of your projectiles will be so large that there will be these huge gaps between them, making it less likely that you'd even hit the survivor to begin with, even if they're not paying attention. Because of these downsides, I've personally found that this ability is best used to zone survivors, since it obviously slows them down by forcing them to crouch. Sure, you can get crazy hits with it, but you won't run into that very often, especially for a noob like you. However, there's a secret tech that I will talk about later in this video that makes this ability infinitely better, so stick around for that. Okay, I'll actually talk about Fly now. It's pretty straightforward. You get lifted up into the air and fly fly forward at a quick speed for 4 seconds. The controls feel really strange at first, but just treat it kind of like an Oni Demon Dash or a Billy Chainsaw and you'll get used to it very quickly. The coolest part about this ability is that you can fly over pallets and windows, but if you do this, I believe it immediately ends your ability, so use this sparingly. Each of these 4 abilities have a lengthy cooldown of 38 seconds at the time of recording, so you'll want to be cycling through them as much as possible for the most value potential. At first, it's going to be hard to track all of these cooldowns in your head, but I promise you'll get used to it. But not only do you need to fully understand how your 4 different abilities work and keep track of all their cooldowns, you also need to understand how all 6 of the survivors' abilities work. Yes, you heard me right. Survivors can interact with these chests around the map to roll a 20-sided die, aka a d20, and get special items. If you roll a 2 to a 4, you just receive a regular item at either half or full durability. If you roll a 5 to 19, you get a magic item. Magic items allow you to gain small effects that counter Vecna. They can come in the form of boots or gauntlets, and just like in Minecraft, if you already have boots equipped, any new boots you find will replace your old boots. Same goes with the gauntlets. But you can wear gauntlets and boots at the same time to get the effects of both. That's also how things work in real life, but I digress. There are 4 different magic items survivors can obtain, each countering one of the 4 spells Vecna can use. The best one by far is Skyguard, which reveals the aura of Vecna while he's flying and for 3 extra seconds after he lands. Seeing the killer's aura is always a very useful tool, but on top of that, a lot of Vecna players will use fly after they hook a survivor, so you'll be able to know if they're coming to you or going in a different direction. Archivist and Interloper are pretty decent. Archivist makes the sphere visible, and Interloper shows you the aura of any pallet affected by Mage Hand. I feel like the Mage Hand one is kind of weird because you're probably going to know that the pallet's affected by it anyway, but I guess it's useful if he does it far away. And then Night Watch is definitely the worst in my opinion. It just shows you the auras of the skeletons in Flight of the Damned. The reason I don't think it's good is because you'll pretty much never be hit from it far away anyway, so it seems mostly pointless to see their auras. With every single magic item, you will see the aura of the killer for a couple seconds when the respective spell is cast, which is a pretty nice addition. I will say this ability alone makes Night Watch better because he's going to be using it in Chase. But that is still not it. I know, just stick with me here. This is where it gets extremely cool. There are 2 even more powerful items that you can obtain if you roll a 20 when opening a chest. These are called Vecna items and have absolutely insane, borderline overpowered effects that are sick as hell. The first one is the Hand of Vecna. This lets you hop into a locker to teleport to a completely random locker at least 10 meters away. This is very useful for getting out of a sticky situation or just for making cool plays. The killer will get Killer Instinct on the locker you teleported to though, so they will know where you went. The other item is the Eye of Vecna. This one's definitely worse, but it's still very powerful and super fun to use. If you hop out of a locker, you become completely invisible and it suppresses your aura, scratch marks, pools of blood, and grunts of pain. On top of that, you get a 25% haste. So you just completely disappear and are able to get away very easily, assuming you can get in and out of a locker mid-chase. Just like the Eye of Vecna, this will also give Killer Instinct to the killer when you become visible again. The downside to these 2 abilities is that they can only be used by survivors that are healthy, and after you use them, you'll become injured. But it's definitely worth it for these effects. There's only one more thing I want to mention about these chests, which happens if you roll a 1. If a survivor rolls a 1, the chest turns into a mimic and will literally start munching on them. When this happens, they will get 4 merciless skill checks, and if they miss any of those skill checks, they will lose a health state. Although they can't be downed by mimics, they'll just go into deep wound. For being a literal god, he doesn't actually have that many strengths. He's very much a jack of all trades, master of none sort of killer. However, there are some strengths that you should absolutely take advantage of to become significantly better at this killer. Double hits. According to the DBD wiki, it is possible to hit a survivor with 2 flying entities at the same time, resulting in an insta-down. I have no idea how this would be possible unless the survivor is literally right next to you, but I figured I'd mention it anyway. Plus, you can technically hit 2 different survivors simultaneously, which is very helpful. Mobility. Although your fly isn't the best for this, it's still technically mobility since you're going almost twice the speed for 4 seconds. It's useful for getting around the map faster, but also extremely useful if you need to get to a certain objective quickly, such as a survivor that's about to pop a gen or cleanse a hex totem. Anti-loop. Mage Hand is a surprisingly useful tool for getting free hits and downs if you use it properly. You'll probably want to never use it at safe pallets because the survivor will likely be able to reach another resource or even get back to the same pallet by the time your Mage Hand goes on cooldown, but it's very strong for unsafe pallets. Your Flight of the Damned is also a great anti-loop ability, especially if you use it as a zoning tool tool to slow the survivors down. And then of course on the off chance that you get a hit, that's obviously a great thing. Mini Mori. A lot of people seem to not know about this, but just like Pyramid Head and Onryo, Vecna has the ability to Mini Mori a survivor if they're in possession of a Vecna item. Vecna Tech. Flight of the Damned will instantly injure someone if they're inside one of the skeletons when it spawns, giving them basically no time to react. Pair this hit with a Mage Hand at whatever pallet they run to, and you can get it down in like less than 10 seconds. Perk synergies. Since there are so many different abilities, there are a ton of perks that you can use to play into different strengths or to cover various weaknesses. Let's start with the perks that pair well with Mage Hand. Enduring. Since this perk reduces your stun cooldown, if you get stunned while Mage Hand is available, you can quickly lift the pallet back up and you're likely to catch up to the survivor before they can get to another resource. Hubris, because you can turn the Enduring situation into an insta-down. Spirit Fury to pair with Enduring, because you should pretty much never use Enduring without Spirit Fury. Brutal Strength, because you'll sometimes be picking up pallets, so you'll need to break more than usual. And lastly, Coup de Grace, which is extremely helpful for hitting survivors at safer loops when using Mage Hand. For perks that pair well with Fly, we have Force Hesitation, because when you down someone, it becomes much easier to catch up to survivors if you fly towards them, since they're 20% slower. Hex Blood Favor, since you can hit a survivor, block all nearby pallets, and catch up to them while the pallets are blocked. Monitor and Abuse, to give survivors less reaction time if you're flying towards them without them knowing. Rapid Brutality, since you can hit a survivor, get really close to them with Fly, and still have some of that speed boost left over to catch up to them. And Unforeseen, because you can lose your tear radius entirely and fly up to people without them really knowing. This works even better on indoor maps. For perks that pair well with Flight of the Damned, we have I'm All Ears, which can help you go for shots through walls since you can see survivors' auras. Nowhere to Hide, to find survivors hiding nearby so you can hit them through walls. And Zanshin Tactics, which could theoretically help you if you don't know where the window and pallet spawns are, but if you know the maps and tiles well, you probably don't need to run this. And the last spell, Dispelling Spear, doesn't really synergize with anything, to be honest. Then there are a few miscellaneous perks that are extremely helpful on Vecna. Corrupt Intervention, to give your abilities time to get off cooldown at the beginning of the match before survivors start working on gens. Franklin's Demise, because there are so many items that people will be picking up during Vecna games. Hoarder, for the same exact reason. Weave Attunement, also for the same exact reason. I will excitedly talk about what this perk is later. Mindbreaker, formerly known as Fearmonger, formerly known as Mindbreaker, because it prevents survivors from seeing the auras of your abilities with their magic items. And honestly, you could use Hex the Third Seal for the same reason. And lastly, Pain Res, because I know if you don't have this perk in your loadout, you will explode. There is a surprising amount of weaknesses that you need to be aware of for this killer. Cooldowns. This is obviously the elephant in the room. Each spell has a pretty lengthy cooldown, so if you don't manage them well, you kind of just become a normal N1 killer with abilities every once in a while. Crouching. Since survivors can crouch under your Flight of the Damned, you probably won't get a lot of hits with it. Safe pallets. Safe pallets pretty much guarantee survivors' safety if they have a double-digit IQ, since they'll be able to get to another resource even if you use Mage Hand. Treasure chests. These things can make or break your game. Sure, survivors will probably waste too much time opening them because they have a gambling addiction, but the things that they can obtain from these chests can put you at a massive disadvantage, especially if they get Vecna items. Large maps. Since your mobility isn't the best, it may be difficult to traverse big maps quickly. And lastly, I can't believe I'm even saying this on record, Urban Evasion. Since one of the best ways to use Flight of the Damned is as a zoning tool to slow them down, Urban Evasion quite literally hard counters that option. Never in a million years would I have guessed that I'd be praising Urban Evasion. Honestly, this is a pretty solid batch of add-ons. Here's some that I would highly recommend using. For the Browns, Raven's Feather is solid. It extends your fly duration by an extra half second, giving you a better mobility and making it easier for you to catch up to a survivor you just hit. Trickster's Glove is also decent. Pallets that are being held by your Mage Hand are held for half a second longer, which doesn't seem like much, but this can be the difference between you getting a hit or not, especially if you're using something like Coup de Grace. For the Yellows, Ring of Spell Storing permanently reduces all cooldowns by 4 seconds, which is obviously a nice buff all around, and Ring of Telekinesis makes your Mage Hand lift up pallets 35% faster, which can help you secure a hit easier. For the green add-ons, all of them are pretty good, but I particularly like the Pearl of Power, which reduces the current cooldown of all spells by 5 seconds after hitting someone with a basic attack, obviously a useful effect. And then I also like the Boots of Speed, which gives you a 5% haste for 2 seconds after using Mage Hand. This paired with Ring of Telekinesis can make Mage Hand much more powerful. His purples are also all pretty good as well, but one of my favorites is the Bag of Holding, which makes it so that 2 of the treasure chests are guaranteed to be a mimic, as well as making survivors oblivious for 15 seconds after opening a chest. Another one I really like is Robe of Eyes, which briefly shows you the auras of any survivors within 8 meters of a chest after you cast a spell. Then we got his Eerie add-ons, which are both quite useful in my opinion. His first Eerie add-on is called Iridescent Book of Vile Darkness, which has 2 effects. The first effect is essentially a massively buffed bamboozle if you use your fly ability. If you fly through a window, it gets blocked for the survivors for 45 seconds. That is a long time. The second effect is that it reduces the number of entities and Flight of the Damned by 3, but it lowers them to the ground so survivors can't crouch under them. This is pretty good if you're actually trying to get hits with this ability, but you have to be more precise with it. His other area add-on, Vorpal Sword, also has 2 effects. One of them makes injured survivors broken if they enter the Dispelling Sphere, and the other causes the Mage Hand to break dropped pallets instead of lifting them, which is obviously very useful. However, it does take 3 seconds and is not instant, so there is a bit of a downside to those situations. I've been dying to get to this section because Vecna has an extremely fun perk that I really enjoy called Weave Attunement. I'm sure you've seen some people complaining about it on Twitter. This perk turns dropped items into a wall hack ability, allowing you to see the auras of any survivor within a 12-meter radius from it. Plus, if the survivor picks the item up, they become oblivious for 30 seconds. This perk is so fun because not only does it give you some insane aura rating potential, it also creates slowdown in the form of another side objective, since survivors will need to go pick up their item to get rid of the wall hacks. But then when they pick up their item, they become oblivious, letting you get some surprise attacks and throwing them off. I love this perk, and obviously using it with Franklin's is a very strong combination. The next best perk in my opinion would be Languid Touch. This makes it so when a survivor scares a crow within 36 meters of your location, they become exhausted for 10 seconds, and then your perk goes on cooldown for 20 seconds. This is kind of just a permanent exhaustion to anybody that's in chase with you, because they're very likely to spook a crow while in chase, which obviously means that they won't be able to use their exhaustion perks. Plus, the 20-second cooldown really isn't that bad, because if you exhaust someone while they're in chase, they're gonna remain exhausted because they're running, so the cooldown doesn't even really matter. And his last perk, which is decent, but I haven't used it enough to figure out if I like it or not. This is Dark Arrogance. It permanently increases your vaulting speed by 25%, which I'm sure you can imagine is very good on, say, the fast vaulting speed with Wraith, but it also permanently increases the duration of killer blinds by any means, as well as pallet stuns by 25%. I think this perk is decent, but the problem with it is that you have to build an entire loadout around it by bringing stuff like Enduring to counteract the downside of this perk, and bringing the other vault speed perks to make this worth it. Overall, I would say this killer has the potential to be high B tier or maybe even A tier under the right circumstances. Although there is a massive skill floor for Vecna, it's worth learning him because it's very fun having to think about so many different things at once. If you want to see more DBD how-to videos, drop a like so I know you find them helpful, and come check out this playlist on screen.